If someone told Emily Carter 5 years ago that she would uncover one of the biggest conspiracies in American health history, she would have laughed hard. A journalist for a small-town Ohio newspaper, Emily's usual assignments involved covering county fairs and missing cats. But everything changed the day she got a call from a retired food scientist named Martin Hale. "Ms. Carter," the voice on the other end said shakily, "I have something to confess. Something big." Emily didn't know what to make of the call. She'd gotten tips before. Most turned out to be hoaxes or crackpot theories. Still, there was something in Martin's voice. A weariness. A hint of guilt. She agreed to meet him. They chose a neutral place. A nondescript diner on the outskirts of Columbus. Emily arrived early, notebook in hand, recorder in her coat pocket. When Martin walked in, she almost didn't recognize him. He was tall but hunched, his shoulders weighed down by more than just age. He looked around nervously before sliding into the booth across from her. "I can't live with it anymore," he said, eyes darting toward the windows. "What we did, it changed everything. We made America fat. And it wasn't an accident." Emily leaned in. "Who's we?" Martin inhaled slowly. "I was part of a task force back in the late 80s. Food Corp hired top scientists, psychologists, and marketing experts. They wanted to boost sales, sure, but not by improving products. They wanted to make food addictive." Emily's pen stopped. "Addictive?" Martin nodded. "Engineered cravings. That's what we called it. We experimented with fat, salt, sugar ratios. We ran thousands of tests on people's brain responses. The goal was simple. Make people want more food more often. Keep them coming back." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But that would mean that obesity wasn't a side effect," Martin finished. "It was part of the plan." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, thick with documents. Meeting transcripts, memos, formulas. "It's all here." Emily opened the folder, scanning the pages. Words jumped out. Bliss point, neurological dependency, lifetime customer. Her heart pounded. "But why come forward now?" she asked. Martin sighed. "My grandson was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes last month. He's 8. I watched him grow up on the same crap we designed. I can't stay quiet anymore." Emily's recorder was still running, her hand still frozen over her notebook. This wasn't just a story. It was the story. But it also meant going up against giants, corporations with billions in profits and powerful legal teams. And yet, Emily knew she couldn't walk away. If what Martin said was true, the American public had been manipulated for decades, tricked into eating themselves sick. As she walked out of the diner with the folder tucked under her arm, she realized she had a choice. Bury the story and stay safe, or expose the truth and risk everything. She chose the truth. Emily barely slept that night. She sat at her kitchen table until dawn, reading every single page Martin had given her. The documents painted a picture of cold, methodical manipulation. It was all there, meeting transcripts from the Food Corp R&D division, notes from psychologists hired to study human eating behavior, even marketing campaign blueprints designed to appeal to children and low-income families. One term came up over and over, bliss point. In one memo dated 1989, a senior scientist explained the bliss point is the precise combination of sugar, fat, and salt that triggers pleasure in the brain without ever signaling fullness. We can drive up consumption by calibrating it for every product line. Emily looked down at the bag of chips she had been nervously munching all night. Suddenly, they tasted like guilt. She knew she couldn't go public without backup. She needed a second source, someone from inside the industry today. After some digging, she found an ex-marketing executive named Danielle Rowe who had left Food Corp 5 years earlier. Danielle had gone quiet after a suspicious NDA settlement. Emily tracked her down through LinkedIn, then used an encrypted messaging app to reach out. They met at a park in Virginia 2 days later. Danielle was reluctant at first, looking over her shoulder like someone who'd lived with paranoia for a while. "I signed papers," Danielle said flatly. "They'll sue me into oblivion." "I'm not asking for documents," Emily said. "Just a conversation. Off the record." Danielle hesitated. Then, as if a dam broke inside her, she spoke. "We were taught to think of people as targets, not customers. Our goal was to increase eating occasions. That's what we called them. Not meals. Not snacks. Occasions. If someone used to eat chips once a week, we wanted them eating every day. So we bought data, TV habits, income levels, even stress patterns. We figured out exactly how to market food to make it feel like comfort, escape, or even love. Emily stared at her, stunned. Did you ever consider the health effects? Danielle laughed bitterly. Of course not. That wasn't our department. We had psychologists to create emotional triggers. Color experts to choose packaging that screamed, "Eat me now." The foods themselves were just delivery systems for dopamine hits. Emily remembered a line from one of Martin's transcripts. We don't need to teach people moderation. We need to make them forget it. Danielle leaned in. You know what our golden demo was? Kids between 5 and 12. We wanted to get them hooked early. That's why we created cereal mascots, playground ads, YouTube cartoons. Get them emotionally attached to the brand before they even hit puberty. Emily felt sick. Why'd you leave? She asked. My daughter, Danielle said. One day she asked why her school lunch made her feel sleepy and why she was getting chubby. She didn't know I helped push that exact product. That was my last day. Emily knew she had more than a story now, she had evidence and witnesses. But she also had a target on her back. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. Corporations like Food Corp had armies of lawyers and PR machines built to silence whistleblowers and reporters alike. Still, she pushed forward. She began writing the article under a codename, The Bliss Point Trap. She secured her devices, backed up every document in encrypted cloud servers, and coordinated with her editor to publish simultaneously with media partners across the country. But just as she was preparing to go live with the story, a black SUV started showing up outside her apartment building. Then came the anonymous emails. One read simply, "We see you." The message was clear. This wasn't just about profits anymore. It was about power. And some people would do anything to protect it. Emily refused to be intimidated. She forwarded the threatening emails to a cybersecurity expert who confirmed what she feared: they weren't random. Her digital trail was being monitored, possibly even her phone tapped. Still, she didn't back down. Instead, she dove deeper. With Martin's blessing, Emily arranged an interview with a former lobbyist named Charles Denton, once a top-level operative who had helped the food industry dodge regulations in Washington for over 2 decades. After retiring in 2012, Charles had written a memoir no publisher would touch. He still had a copy, though, and a conscience. I used to call senators over brunch, Charles said, sipping coffee in a Baltimore cafe. We made sure they voted against added sugar labels and for subsidies that helped companies keep prices low on junk food. The idea was to bury real food under a mountain of cheap, hyper-palatable garbage. Emily raised an eyebrow. Subsidies? Charles nodded. Government programs were supposed to support American farmers, but guess what crops got the most help? Corn, soy, wheat, cheap filler ingredients. We turned them into high-fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, and refined flours. Then we sold them back to Americans in shiny packages as convenience. The real kicker? We marketed it as freedom. Emily couldn't believe how deep the manipulation went. So it was all by design? She asked. Oh, absolutely. We worked hand-in-hand with ad agencies and media outlets. We paid scientists to downplay links between sugar and obesity. Funded independent studies that made fat the enemy instead. The goal was confusion. If the public didn't know what to believe, they'd keep buying what tasted good. He leaned closer. You want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes? We even used data from the tobacco industry. Emily blinked. What? Charles smirked. When big tobacco started losing court cases, a lot of their behavioral researchers and PR consultants jumped ship to us. They brought with them decades of knowledge about addiction and perception management. We didn't just learn how to make food addictive, we learned how to defend it. Emily felt chills. Suddenly it made sense how fast food chains used bright reds and yellows to spike hunger, how ads always featured smiling families and catchy jingles. It wasn't food. It was behavioral engineering. That night, Emily started drafting the third part of her exposé, this one titled Fat Profits, Fatter Lies. She detailed the corruption behind closed doors in Washington, the money trails that linked food giants to lobbyists, and the deception that trickled down into school lunches, hospital vending machines, even military rations. As she worked, she remembered her own childhood: toaster pastries for breakfast, Lunchables at school, microwave dinners before bed. It wasn't just her audience that had been duped. She had been a victim too. The next morning, she woke up to an unexpected message from Danielle. Be careful. I think they're going after Martin next. Panicked, Emily called Martin immediately, but he didn't answer. She drove to his home 2 hours away. When she got there, the door was open. His place had been ransacked. Files were gone. Computers wiped. And Martin? Nowhere to be found. She called the police, but there was no sign of forced entry. They said he probably left on his own. But Emily knew better. On the fridge, Martin had left one thing untouched, a sticky note with just 3 words. Don't stop digging. Martin's disappearance was more than a warning, it was a turning point. Emily doubled her security protocols, ditched her phone, and operated entirely offline for several days. She backed up her files in multiple encrypted USBs and sent copies to her editor and 2 trusted journalist friends in New York and Chicago. If something happened to her, the story would still get out. But something was still missing. If she wanted to shake the American public and wake them up from decades of food deception, she needed someone inside the present-day system. Someone still active. Someone who could confirm that nothing had changed. That's when she remembered a brief, anonymous reply to one of her encrypted outreach messages. A screen name Nutridoc7. It simply said, "You're on the right track. The addiction model still drives everything. Ask about flavor oscillation." Flavor oscillation. Emily had never heard the term before, but it turned out to be a gold mine. She managed to connect with Nutridoc7 on a secure call. His voice was scrambled, but his words were clear. "I work in product development," he said. "You know how some snacks never get boring? That's not magic. That's science. We design products that trick your tongue into thinking each bite is slightly different, like a new experience every time. It's called flavor oscillation. It prevents sensory fatigue." Emily scribbled furiously. "So people never get tired of eating?" "Exactly. It's engineered to bypass your satiety signals. Combine that with calorie density and you've got a product that can make someone consume double without realizing it. We test this with brain scans and focus groups." Emily's blood boiled. "Is there a line? Any regulation to stop this?" The voice laughed bitterly. "Only voluntary guidelines. And guess what? Companies ignore them. We sell the illusion of choice. We make 10 brands that are all owned by the same parent company. It doesn't matter if you eat brand A or brand B, it's the same lab-crafted addiction." Emily asked the question she'd been holding back. "But why? Why not just make food healthy?" A pause. "Then, because addiction scales. Satisfaction doesn't. It's not profitable to fill you up. It's profitable to keep you coming back." Emily was silent. Nutridoc7 ended with a final warning. "They'll come for you next. Be ready." The next day, she found a tracking device under her car. It was time to go public. Emily worked through the night, finalizing her exposé. She didn't just want to publish a story. She wanted to start a national movement. A wake-up call. Her editor helped coordinate a media rollout with several partners, an online documentary short, a podcast miniseries, and a special Sunday edition front-page spread. She titled the final series, "Manufactured Cravings: How America Was Fed into an Epidemic." And it worked. The morning it went live, the internet exploded. #Bliss trended for 3 days. TV anchors argued over the ethics of food engineering. Nutritionists were invited onto talk shows. Former executives started speaking up. Some praised her. Others dismissed it as anti-business fear-mongering. But what no one could ignore were the numbers. Since 1980, obesity rates in the U.S. had tripled. Childhood diabetes was at a historic high. Nearly 70% of all packaged foods contained added sugar, often hidden under dozens of different names. And most damning of all? The emails and documents she published showing clear, deliberate strategies to exploit psychological weaknesses for profit. Emily had cracked the illusion. But the war wasn't over. Food Corp and several other conglomerates issued denials, then filed a lawsuit for defamation. They claimed her sources were unverified, the documents taken out of context. She expected that. She was ready. What she didn't expect was the letter that came in the mail a week later, no return address. Inside was a Polaroid picture of Martin Hale tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Written across the photo in permanent marker, "Tell them to stop." Emily sat frozen at her desk, the Polaroid of Martin clutched in her hand. It was no longer just about whistleblowing or food science, this was now about life and death. She scanned the photo for clues, a metal chair, a warehouse floor, fluorescent light above. No landmarks. No identifiers. She contacted law enforcement, but they dismissed it as staged. Her editor urged her to pull back, just until things cool off. Even Danielle, the former marketing exec, called with trembling concern. "You've done enough. You opened people's eyes. Don't risk your life. But Emily couldn't quit now. Not when Martin, who had sacrificed everything to come forward, was being held as a hostage. Not when millions of Americans were still unknowingly trapped in a cycle of chemically crafted cravings. So she did what she did best. She investigated. With the help of a cyber forensics contact, she had the photo examined. Traces of pollen on Martin's shirt suggested a location near an agricultural processing plant. Background audio in the image's metadata, captured faintly by the Polaroid's microphone, matched machinery used in a plant just outside Peoria, Illinois. It was owned by a shell company that, when Emily traced it back, led straight to one of Food Corp's subsidiaries. She didn't tell the police. She went herself. It was reckless. Dangerous. But she was prepared. A tiny GoPro strapped to her jacket streamed live to the cloud. If anything happened, people would know. She approached the facility just after midnight, weaving through back roads and overgrown fences. Through a dusty window, she saw movement, a chair, a man. Martin. She was about to call out when two guards emerged from the shadows. One grabbed her. The other knocked her camera loose. They dragged her inside. "What did we tell you, Ms. Carter?" said a cold, familiar voice. It was William Hart, a senior executive from Food Corp. He had been quoted in her article denying all allegations. Now he stood casually, as if kidnapping was just another item on his schedule. "You don't understand what you're messing with," Hart said. "The food industry feeds the world. We keep shelves stocked. We keep economies afloat." Emily, blood trickling from her lip, stared at him. "You poison people for profit." "We gave people what they wanted," Hart snapped. "No one forced them to eat chips or soda. You know what Americans fear more than obesity? Inconvenience. Hunger. Cooking. We solved that." He turned away. Martin was a loose end. "But you turned this into a crusade. You made people angry. And anger disrupts business." Emily's voice was hoarse but firm. "Good." He raised a brow. "Excuse me. I want people angry," she said. "Because for the first time in 30 years, they're finally asking questions. And you can't shut that down. Not anymore." At that moment, the sound of tires screeched outside. "Sirens." Emily smiled. "That live stream? It's been broadcasting this whole conversation." Hart's face went pale. In minutes, federal agents stormed the warehouse. Martin was rescued. Emily was taken to safety. And Hart? He was arrested along with 3 other Food Corp employees on charges of conspiracy, unlawful detention, and destruction of whistleblower evidence. The story dominated national headlines for weeks. Congressional hearings were held. Multiple executives were subpoenaed. Schools canceled contracts with Food Corp. The FDA announced new guidelines requiring full disclosure of flavor and chemical engineering practices. But perhaps most importantly, people started reading food labels again. Emily received thousands of messages. Some grateful, some horrified. Parents threw out sugary snacks. Teens made viral videos decoding deceptive ingredients. Nutritionists were finally being listened to. Of course, Food Corp rebranded. They always do. But something had shifted. A crack had formed in their armor. And Emily's story was the wedge that started it all. She didn't go back to small-town journalism. She launched a platform called CraveWatch, where other whistleblowers and nutrition experts could share the truth. Together, they created an interactive database of food additives, corporate links, and product histories. As for Martin, he recovered and moved to Oregon. Quiet but free, and proud. The final lines of Emily's published book summed it up best. "The food industry didn't make us fat by accident. They studied us, fed our fears, and designed our cravings. But now we know. And knowing finally is enough to fight back."